Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're back.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude.
It was tough today because it's gorgeous out right now. It's like, man,
nope, there's nowhere I would rather be than in my dark, like, window-covered room, staring at a notepad, getting ready to drop some fucking knowledge on you people. Because that's what we're about. This is today we're going way back to, how we cut our teeth on this show. Before we got filthy fucking rich. And I got a huge coke problem that I'm stoked about. I was telling
it's a story as old as time, but yeah.
I was telling Japanese ghost stories. I was just a boy back then, and now I'm a grown man obsessed with the same shit. So today, these ghost stories are called in Japan they're called the Nihon San Dai Kadan, which is Japan's big... I think
we all are familiar with that.
Which I hope this is a literal one-to-one translation, because they say translated to Japan's big three ghost stories. Which is just like a cultural thing, I guess, is like there's a ton of ghost stories in Japan, but these are the big ones.
I like to think that ghosts in Japan, that's their lifelong dream, is to get into the big three, to knock one off and become...
Well, here's the funny one. The first one we're going to talk about today is the story of Otsuyu. And Otsuyu started as a Chinese folktale. So
I was gonna say, it sounds like an American folktale. Started as I'll sue you.
I'll sue you, yeah. Japan's three big ghost stories, as brought to you by China, I guess. But Japan did add a lot of details and characters to it. So a lot of these stories start as kind of local folktales, and then they went on to become, kabuki productions, and as technology advanced, you would get movies and stuff about them, and it really became a Japanese story by way of theft. So the story of Otsuyu starts long ago. There was a widowed man named Ogiwara. One night he saw a beautiful woman and her servant walking down the street carrying a lantern, and Ogiwara was smitten instantly, because apparently marital grief lasts exactly as long as it takes to meet another hot girl.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So he moved on. Good for him.
I'll never meet another woman as hot as you. Never mind. Here she is.
Hold on. The girl was named Otsuyu, and he invited her to his home, and they banged right away all night long, while I assume the servant just kind of awkwardly had to stand around.
Give me some water, servant. I'm dehydrated.
Run to 7-Eleven and pick me up a Slurpee. They stayed all the way through the night, and reluctantly Otsuyu departed into the early morning. But she returned the following evening, and presumably with the uncomfortable servant at her side. And Ogiwara was, just overjoyed, because he was just blindly falling in love with this woman he just met. And also probably because sex is pretty cool and he wanted to keep doing that.
Yeah.
Apparently it was
very... no, thank you. I've had enough.
Yeah. There are those hookups where it's this was great. Godspeed. Yeah. Thank you so much for the one-time thing. So apparently it was very cool for him, because she regularly visited every night, and Ogiwara quickly lost interest in anything that wasn't her. He stopped leaving the house. He stopped taking care of himself. He just lived to have sex and presumably stare blankly at the wall day in and day out until she came back.
And good for her for not caring that he quit taking care of himself and continuing to have sex with him.
Yeah.
I mean...
That's love,
Right.
After 20 days of this shit, Ogiwara's neighbors were like, you gotta take a fucking bath, dude. And one such neighbor was an old man who grew suspicious when he heard laughing and singing coming from the house, presumably because he knew Ogiwara was a miserable person and nobody would ever have fun with him. Something was afoot. He peeked through a hole in Ogiwara's wall with lotions and tissues in hand, I assume, because he's a fucking creep. But instead of some beautiful woman, he saw Ogiwara entwined in the arms of a skeleton. Ogiwara seemed completely unaware and under the spell of this phantom. The next day, the old man called for Ogiwara and told him he was fucking a skeleton ghost and he needed to get his ass to the temple. Ogiwara did, and was shocked to find Otsuyu's grave there, with her tattered lantern draped across it. The priest told Ogiwara that he must resist Otsuyu because I guess you're just not allowed to decide for yourself if you want to fuck a ghost in this goddamn country. Ogiwara was given a magical charm to keep Otsuyu at bay, and it worked, and she never came back to his house. Which, for Ogiwara...
This is so unrealistic, because no guy would do it. He'd be like, eh.
Well, story continues. Because Ogiwara is I've never related to a character in one of these more. Because he's like, this sucks. Because he was in love, he was having a ton of sex, and some fucking annoying neighbor's complaints screwed his whole arrangement up.
And I love how flimsy that excuse is. I heard giggling and laughing, so something must have been wrong. So I decided to spy on the giggling and laughing. And
it's also like, I don't know if I'm above, like, it's like, hey, it's a skeleton demon. Well, to me, it just looks like a hot chick. Yeah. Stop being so superficial. How about that? But Ogiwara missed her, and he hated that old man who cock-blocked him. One night in his lonely misery, Ogiwara got drunk, so of course he acted completely on impulse and wandered to the temple. Otsuyu was waiting for him at the temple gate, and gently she led him back to her coffin. Later, when nobody could find Ogiwara, the priest opened up Otsuyu's grave, and inside they found his body wrapped in the skeletal arms of Otsuyu. Or he was just a weirdo who fucked dead bodies, and there's always a literal version of these events.
I was going to say, that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we came up with the term boning.
Hell yeah, dude. Thank you, Japan. So that's story one in our triple header.
I like it because it's not even really like I guess it kind of has the ghost story moral of like, oh, you'll follow the allure of a woman like to the grave. It's like he died happy, like he's a hero.
He got fucked to death, which is a lot of guys would pick it if you had to pick it out of a list of like ways you could go.
It's like, no, you must die lonely and miserable in a slow death. It's like, nah, I think I'll pick the demon sex. Thank you.
Lung cancer or banging a demon for a while. One's
but other
more
than that,
interesting.
it's like, there's not really much of a point or a moral to the story. It's just like, oh, his wife died and he hooked up with a ghost.
Yeah, the best moral you have there is like loneliness is very depressing.
And I like that was a story that they had to import from somebody else and then decided it was one of their three best stories that they have.
Well, maybe not one of the best, but one of the biggest. These are the big three.
Well, I bet the actors liked acting it out on the kabuki theater.
Yeah.
Although I think from what I remember, traditional kabuki is all male, isn't it?
Way back in the day. I'm sure there's a modern version of kabuki theater now where they let...
And I could be wrong. Maybe it wasn't always all male, but for some part of my brain's thinking it was.
Well, all kind of ancient theater, like, you didn't have female actors, like, originally, like, in the, like, Shakespearean time. Like, it was like, you had boys playing Juliet and shit.
Yeah.
So we all kind of did it. We all agreed that grown men would be kissing little boys in romantic plays.
But it's okay, though, as long as you're pretending that they're women.
Yeah. And I feel like ever since then, theater has been trying to like clean up its image ever since. So next up in our stories, we got the story of Okiku. a woman who was a dishwashing servant at Himeji Castle. So this is the only one today that we're going to talk about. But while I was putting this stretch of topics together, there's a ton of Japanese stories that take place in Himeji Castle. Apparently they just fucked up a ton.
Yeah.
So Okiku was a hardworking and beautiful servant, and quickly caught the eye of a samurai who worked for her master. This samurai's name was Oyama, and he tried to seduce Okiku many times, but he fucking sucked shit, and Okiku turned him down every time.
I imagine he was one of those guys that's like, hey, baby, look at my sword, and then he'd, like, drop it or cut himself on it. Like, yeah.
He's just an asshole. Like, he's probably one of those dudes who thought, like, just being a samurai, I should be able to get any girl I want. Yeah. Annoyed and impatient, Oyama grew really sick of these rejections and tried to win a woman's heart the only way a man knows how, with trickery and blackmail. In the castle, there were 10 expensive dishes that belonged to the castle's lord, and Oyama hid one of them. Calling for Okiku.
It was his, like, NASCAR collection. It took the Dale Earnhardt Jr. plate, and the guy's like, son of a bitch.
God damn it. He then called for Okiku and told her one of the fine dishes was missing and demanded to know where it was. Okiku was horrified because losing one of these prized dishes was a crime punishable by death, because humans are reasonable people and always dealt with shit fairly.
And I like where this is going. There's no better way to get a woman to love you than to trick her into thinking she's about to be murdered.
Yeah, well, so she counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and she repeated this count over and over. Every time she was one short, and she was just in disbelief and distraught.
I liked how she had to count to 10 one by one. You couldn't just, like, visually do a quick check down.
Well,
like,
I mean,
that's
you know
9.
when you're missing something important, like, you're kind of like, it's got to wait. Like, how many times do you check the same spot when something's missing?
That's true. I mean, this will be a bit of an interruption, but, like, yesterday I had to go to the ATM after work to do deposits, and, like, as I'm walking up to the ATM, some, like, older guy comes, like, basically running past me and, like, ditches in front of me at the last second, and at first I'm like, you fucking asshole, and then it was because he had left his card in the machine, and he was like, and I'm like, well, I get that, then you want to get there before I do, because you don't want me to, like, hit something and, like, fuck it up. But it had taken his card, because, you know, I don't know. He apparently is not familiar with ATM machines at all, but the way they're designed is when it spits your card back out, if you don't grab it, or if you don't answer like you're done with your thing, after a certain timer, it just, like, eats it to keep it safe so that, like, some stranger like me doesn't come up and say, hey, free debit card. But he kept looking, like, he at least 10 different times he was, like, peering into that card slot, like, trying to reach in there to see if his card... I'm like, it's not there, dude. Like, that's not how any of this works. So, I guess you're right. People, when you're stressed and missing something important...
Especially if, like, you know you're gonna fucking die. If that thing is gone, you're gonna be like, what the fuck? It was just here. Oyama told Okiku he would overlook her mistake and tell the master it wasn't her fault if she would become his mistress. Though she was afraid of the death penalty, she refused him again because she was a fucking boss.
She's like, Dwayne, you still live in your parents' basement.
Yeah. Your
samurai sword's a toilet paper roll, like, taped together.
Like, just, you know, I love this woman. Furious and embarrassed, Oyama ordered his servants to beat Okiku with a wooden sword. That's
another good way to win her heart.
Afterward, he tied her up and suspended her over the castle well. He tortured her, repeatedly dunking her into the well, spaced between stretches where he would just beat the shit out of her. He demanded one more time she sleep with him, and Okiku still refused.
Well, yeah, you generally don't grow more fond of somebody when they do that stuff to you.
Yeah, but just like, as afraid as she was to die, like, she was just, fuck you.
Well, yeah, I mean, we already established at the beginning that she'd rather be executed than sleep with the guy, so I don't think that's probably changed.
Yeah. Like, I wish the story had a happier ending where she somehow threw his ass into the well or triangle choked the shit out of him. because Okiku I love how she doesn't fuck around with some scrub-ass samurai. But it's a ghost story, so Oyama, at this rejection, slashed her fatally with his sword and dropped the body down the well. Which, like, if you're Oyama, best case scenario, you just contaminated the water source, you fucking dick.
Right.
Worst case scenario.
Say that too.
Worst case scenario, you haunted the fuck out of everything because you thought you were too good to jack off.
And contaminated the water.
And you fucked up the water.
Yeah, right.
Soon after, her ghost was seen wandering the castle grounds because of fucking course that's what would happen. She would rise from the well, enter her master's house, and search for the missing dish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. After counting 9, she would let out a blood-curdling scream that stretched throughout the entire castle. She specifically seemed to target Oyama, keeping him awake with her anguished screams and constant counting.
For some reason. That seems unfair.
Yeah.
To target the guy that killed you.
Yeah. You know.
Pretty random.
Yeah. It seems like profiling to me. But keeping him awake with her anguished screams and constant counting, but his fate isn't really clarified in the story itself. Like, there are versions of it that obviously will...
Well, if I was writing the ending, it would be that he was so, like, you know how when you don't get sleep, you just go kind of, like, you get uncoordinated and you basically, like, lose it. Yeah. So one day, that in his, like, half asleep, half not state, he dropped one of the other 9 plates and the king had him executed. That would be my ending.
That would be funny. But it was said that if you heard part of her counting, you would get very sick. But if you actually heard her count all the way to 9 and then heard the scream, you would die shortly after.
Oh.
So
yeah, I think I'd rather be sick, so I'll just take off running.
Yeah. So he probably died.
I think I'd be safe. I don't understand Japanese, so I think if you don't know what she's saying, you're probably okay.
If you shout back, "What?" then you're safe.
Is she counting or are those rap lyrics? I don't know.
The lord of the castle decided that something had to be done, and brought in a priest who waited in the garden all night for the restless spirit. When Okiku rose out of the well and began her count of the dishes and reached up to 9, the quick-thinking priest shouted 10, and Okiku's spirit, relieved that the missing dish had been found, disappeared.
I'd like it. I mean, the whole time that the ghost is counting, it's like, fuck, I didn't plan for this. What do I do? And you get to 9 just out of desperation. It's like, 10.
It's a 10. Yeah, and keep just one-upping her.
And it worked. And I also love that it worked because the ghost that got... And presumably once you become a ghost, you figure out that you were framed for it by the guy that killed you. Because, ghosts are generally all-knowing.
Well, it's not so cause and effect, though. Like, there is a vengeance in play, but that's like... It's not a will of Okiku to, like, specifically get revenge on him. It's like...
Yeah.
The force of, like, whatever made you a ghost is targeting that thing that, like, whatever person wronged you and brought you to that.
But I like that the conclusion is that, okay, we found the plate. Not like, okay, I got justice for my murder. It's like, the plate's what I'm worried about. Now that it's back, I'm good.
Yeah. Everything is as it should be. She just wanted it to be clear that she did a good job.
That number 8 car is back up on the mantle where it should be.
Yeah. But on a footnote on this story, while her ghost left, this is Japan, and weird shit kept happening at the castle after her death. Specifically, Okiku Mushi appeared from the well. And these were just fucked up caterpillars whose upper half was that of a beautiful woman that people swore was Okiku. They didn't do much of anything directly because they're fucking caterpillars, and what could they do?
Are they human-sized caterpillars, or are they caterpillar-sized caterpillars?
The drawing makes them look like kind of slightly bigger than normal caterpillars, like but with cat, like a human upper dog. Half.
Yeah. Cabbage Patch doll size.
Yeah. So they didn't seem to do much.
Like, glowworm baby dolls came from. I don't know if you ever. They were a toy back. I think they still have them. But anyway. Yeah. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the visual image here.
Well, luckily, we'll have links. And again, these Japanese ghost stories are brought to you by yokai.com. The illustrations are half the fun of this. The guy does a really fucking cool job, like making these weird fucking things.
I love his, yeah.
But yeah, these didn't do much directly, but random ghost shit seemed to keep happening as they appeared. So yeah. Our final story today, in this triple header of Japan's big old, scary old fucking ghosts, is that of Oiwa. This is supposedly a story based off real events, which won't surprise you because it's about another woman being abused by a piece of shit. Supposedly the real Oiwa died sometime in 1636, and her ghost haunts the places she lived, as well as the places where her story is performed, like kabuki theaters and film sets. Plenty of productions claim that the curse of her ghost was responsible for disasters and deaths that plagued these adaptations of her story.
So it's good that they keep doing them.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do, bitch out? Like, we got...
It's one of the 3 top stories of our country. We have to do it. Yeah. Damn it.
A shrine and a temple was even made for her to appease her anger on the ruins of her family's house, but a fire destroyed this shrine in 1879. They rebuilt the shrine at another part of Tokyo, which I don't know how you can call it the same shrine if you moved it. But there seemed to be a pattern because this one got destroyed too, firebombed in World War II.
So they're just creating like a super ghost.
Yeah, this is steroids for phantoms. After the war, her new shrine and the original were rebuilt, and apparently they found her actual grave, which actors and crews telling her story would visit to pay their respects. So the story goes like this. Oiwa was married to a samurai named Yaemon. It was a terrible marriage because a lot of samurai were abusive, evil fucks with a power complex, which, sounds familiar. And Yaemon was also, on top of that, a wasteful thief of a shithead, making this a bad situation for Oiwa. She decided to run away from her marriage back to her family home. Yaemon followed her, but he was stopped in the road by her father, Yatsuya Seimon. Seimon knew this guy was a piece of shit at this point, and specifically that he had stolen money from his own employer. He demanded he divorce his daughter, but Yaemon drew his sword and murdered Seimon right there on the road. He caught up with...
that's a good way to, win your good graces back into a woman's hearts, murder her father.
Well, she at this point, she didn't know that he did it. Because when he caught up to Oiwa, he lied and said a stranger must have killed her father on the road. He begged her to reconcile and promised to even avenge her father's murder. Oiwa became pregnant sometime after that, and times only became harder. As a well-known piece of shit, Yaemon couldn't hold on to money and couldn't reliably earn any, so they were mostly broke, and Oiwa became sickly following the birth of their child. Yaemon, considering he committed murder to keep his wife, quickly became resentful of how sickly she had become, and really his lot in life in general. Next door to them was a rich doctor named Ito Kihei, and he had a pretty granddaughter named Ume, who was, for whatever fucking reason, instantly attracted to Yaemon and wanted to marry him. The doctor, wanting to please his granddaughter, conspired to help her marry the well-known piece of shit. So, this plot involved a prescribed ointment from the doctor for Oiwa, under the guise of, healing her sickness after childbirth.
I bet it doesn't.
It sure didn't. It was actually a horrible poison which horribly disfigured her face, which disgusted Yaemon even further. Then the doctor convinced Yaemon to divorce Oiwa and marry Ume, which wasn't...
Okay, that didn't go the direction I thought it was going.
Yeah, which wasn't a hard sell for Yaemon anyway, because Ume was beautiful and he knew how much money he would be marrying into. Yaemon began pawning Oiwa's possessions and their son's possessions to earn the money to marry Ume, and then hired his friend to rape Oiwa so he had an official, quote, legitimate reason to divorce his wife, by saying
I love
that
how
she
many
cheated on
cultures
him.
I was gonna say that's a thing in a lot of cultures where it's like, oh yeah, we know it wasn't willing, you got raped and that's horrible, but you had sex with another man, you hussy.
But when his friend entered the home and approached Oiwa, he was shocked and frightened to see the face of the once beautiful woman. He quickly abandoned the plan and told Oiwa what the fuck Yaemon was doing and showed her what they had done to her face. It was the first time she had actually seen it. She tried to cover her face with hair, but the hair came out in bloody clumps when she touched it. She snapped, and in her madness she stabbed herself through the throat with a sword. Bleeding to death, she cursed Yaemon's name over and over until she could breathe no more. Yaemon's servant discovered the body and reported her death back to him.
At which he said, that's the end of that chapter.
Yep, and they're fine. So the servant, his name was Koe, and he was kind of confused and suspicious when Yaemon was overjoyed to hear that his wife was dead.
Yeah, that's not a typical reaction.
Right. And so, but before Koe could investigate what happened any further, Yaemon murdered him and nailed both his body and Oiwa's to a door and threw the door into a river. He made up a lie that the two were sleeping together.
For the bodies, yeah.
I think to make the idea that they tried to run away together or some shit, but they're nailed together and they're cut to shit. So
these two corpses nailed themselves to this door
out of love.
And made their escape. Yeah,
you know how Titanic ended.
And boys and girls, that's how we came up with the term nailing somebody. See, this is the sexual education episode. You didn't know it.
They gave us all of our sexual vernacular.
Yeah.
He made up a lie that the two are sleeping together, and now he was free to marry Ume, which is fucking hilarious because this whole plan was all about presentation, making it look like he was justified to leave his wife. But everyone in town except this fucking doctor and his granddaughter knew he sucked shit. So nobody probably would have been surprised if he was just like, yeah, I just wanted to fuck some younger girl next door and get the money. You know,
but you got to maintain your honor that you don't have as a thieving samurai.
The curse didn't take long, though. On his wedding night to Ume, Yaemon had trouble sleeping. He rolled over in bed and saw right next to him the horrible face of his former bride. In his panic, he slashed at the ghost with his sword, only to snap him out of the illusion to reveal he had just murdered his new bride, who now lay dead on the floor.
Whoops.
Fuck that up. Terrified, he ran next door to the doctor for help. When the door opened, he saw the ghost of his murdered servant. Again, he slashed away with his sword in desperate fear, but soon saw that it was another illusion, that he had slain the doctor instead.
Damn it, you got me again. I'm curious what he thought the doctor could be like, hey, yeah, you know that granddaughter you left I just accidentally cut her head off. Can you fix it?
Yeah, you got any ointment for that? He fled into the night, but Oya's ghost pursued him. He never escaped her face. It would haunt her dreams. Her voice cried out for vengeance. He eventually ran into the mountains and found an abandoned cabin, but he was followed there too. He could no longer tell the difference between the nightmare and reality, and he died there, having been driven completely mad. The story just kind of gives up explaining what happened to their son, but I'm sure he's fine.
Yeah.
You know,
you tend to grow up normal in a situation like that. I mean,
yeah,
happens to lots of kids.
Yeah, it's never really elaborated on. But yeah, those are the big three ghost stories. You feel the weight of them. You feel impressed.
I do.
Well, yeah, those are a lot of fun to put together.
It's amazing how many. Well, it's not really amazing because we know the reasons why, and they're not the best reasons, but like how many cultures, and especially these Japanese myths that we've done a ton of, but how many of them are like, oh well, it starts with the woman and then she has to wreak vengeance. You know, sometimes, most of the time it's justified, but it's like,
yeah.
But they all kind of paint these women in these like scary like. Although it's almost, you'd argue it's good because the moral is, hey, like, don't fucking murder your wife or beat a woman for your rejection.
Considering
or whatever.
like that's like these ones, but there's like There's like a fucking 90% of these stories are like, obey your husband. Never stop listening to your husband. Or you'll be a ghost. But, yeah. That's it. That's all I have to say about that. How are you?
Such a rich tapestry of mythology that I feel like we don't get over here. Because our ghost story, we've got ghost stories, but they're all pretty much the same, and it's almost always
they're not
like
detailed
ghost
stories. Like all of our detailed ghost stories, some fuck will be like, that should be a movie, and most of the time it shouldn't be. You know, but like they had these ghost stories and they had to like flesh them out just to keep them entertaining. Like our ghost stories are always like, she died in the 1800s and now she looks like an 1800s.
You see her in the window pining for her lost love, or the soldier walks the battlefield without his head. It's like, well, yeah.
Or they're like, or it's always like Civil War ghosts. Like those are the only people in fucking American history who had a fucking bad death.
Yeah. And we do, frankly, it is wrong to say that America doesn't have a rich history of like supernatural stories, but they're all Native Americans, so we basically ignore those. We're like, nope.
Yeah. Well, those aren't cool, you know? These are great because they're all like vengeance ones. It's like ghosts doing shit to like get back at you for fucking with them.
What I like is how many of them seem to like, it's like this ghost is out for vengeance, so it's going to just kill like randomly everybody. Not somebody like, and I get, because a lot of ghost stories are like, oh, you know, she was killed by her redheaded husband, so redheads to this day keep getting home. It's like, well, at least you see the connection there. Like,
yeah, I like. That's my Travel Channel show, Ghost Prejudices.
I imagine there's not too many redheaded ghost stories in Japan, but
it said she desperately hates gingers. It's like, so you're just like bringing like redheaded friends in on it. Like, hang on, I just need you to stay in this hallway and see if they get really pissed off.
Hey, Carrot Top, go in that room by yourself for a minute.
Oh, well, that would blow up the house. You can't put Carrot Top in there.
He's pretty fucking buff. That'd be great. I'd like to see a fight between him and a ghost.
I'd like to see him. Yeah, I'd like to see him fight a ghost hunter. I hope Carrot Top, like, I hope he haunts something when he dies, because it would be entertaining.
He'd definitely come back as a poltergeist, because those are the ones that tend to like mess with stuff, and he's a prop comic, so it makes sense.
Why is there a towel on my head? Just random little shit like that.
Yeah, why is this rubber ducky sitting on top of my phone again? I get a duck call. Ha ha, very funny, Carrot Top.
Oh, you. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this week's show. There will be another show someday.
And, whether you like it or not, every time we say, "Oh yeah, we'll be back next week," it feels like half of a promise and half a threat.
Or you could just slide into my DMs and I'll give you my PayPal account. I'm saying $50. I could blow this whole show up. I have that kind of pull.
Yeah. Every man has a price, and Ben's is pretty low.
Yeah, it's $50. What I don't tell you is I start a new podcast. Yeah. Every time I get paid off to destroy the previous one. So, anyway, we'll be back next week. Ciao.
Toodaloo.